My name is Christopher Parry as well, just so you know, and I'll be taking you through the session today. I work for Amgueddfa Cymru, and that's Museum Wales, and I'm based down in Cardiff today, and you guys are based everywhere else. Today, I'm having the privilege, really, of going through our Spring Bulbs workshop, virtual workshops with you. And we haven't done virtual workshops for Spring Bulb sessions before, but you're all busy being scientists in your own different schools all across Britain, which is amazing. We got over 170 schools taking part in this kind of climate awareness and scientific project, which is fantastic. But yeah, I'm well, my boss calls me the celebration officer for this project because it's 20 years, which always makes my job sound like really like a party, but it's not. It's not. It does require some work and less party sometimes. But essentially, what we're looking to do is we're looking to do some unique events just to mark the 20 years of Spring Bulbs. And yeah, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going through a few different elements. And so first and foremost, if we answer if well, I'll be asking you a few different questions, and because obviously with the visual lag and the audio lag sometimes, because there's so many of us on the call, using the chat option is going to be easiest. So the fastest typing teachers are going to be the ones that are going to be, top of the class. So make sure you get your typing skills on, all teachers. And yeah, we will be recording today's session, as I said earlier. So if you do need to refer to anything, because there's quite a lot of information on some elements of this, but again, we'll go through it all at quite a decent pace, and we'll be going for about 40 or so minutes all told, really, maybe a tiny bit more. But we'll be exploring these kind of broad subjects first and foremost. So we will be looking at botanical illustrations, and we will be discovering that the artists behind the illustrations were as much artists as they were scientists. And then we'll be kind of looking at the basic knowledge that you would need to create these drawings and testing your knowledge as well. And then we will be looking at the life of a favorite of mine, a favorite artist of mine, Cedric Morris, who became known as an artist and plantsman. And he links into a project that I'll be giving you and working towards at the end, because you've got a very unique task at the end, which is having the chance to name a brand new variety of daffodil that we've created specifically for the 20th anniversary of Spring Bulbs. And so, yeah, it's a really unique opportunity to live on in history as in plant form. And yeah, it's a really good opportunity, I think, in many ways. But first and foremost, we want to be thinking of botanical illustration, and so the history of botanical illustration. So first we'll kind of look at those two words generally, really, and the two words, obviously, botanical and illustration. Illustration, most of you should have a vague idea of what it is or know fully what it is, but botanical maybe not so much. So while I'm talking about what illustration is, have a think, and don't shout it out in class or anything, just have a think to yourself what botanical might mean. And so illustration is obviously a picture to explain something that we're looking at. Now, a really good example of this is if you were looking in a book. Obviously, a lot of books have illustrations in them. But unlike kind of comic books, illustrations in books are often describing specifically what the words on the page are saying. So you might even get some dictionaries or thesauruses or other, encyclopedias that have pictures of things that they're explaining as well. And so it's something to describe what's being written about, essentially. But botanical now, a bit of a harder word. Is anyone willing to type up a quick guess as to what botanical is? And we can have a look in the chat, see if any of you get it right, really. If you haven't got no sound, it may well be in your settings, just to let you know there, because I think the sound in general is working across the rest of the chat. So maybe it's in your settings. On St. Patrick's Primary School is first off, and then we've got perfect. You're all getting it. You're all getting it. Yes, I love. Yeah, it's a type of metal. One of the people says, no, it's not. But I can see the kind of word is there, yeah. And you're all kind of saying related to plants. We think it's related to plants and all that type of thing. And yeah, growing plants, yeah, plants, bulbs start sprouting. It's generally what we've got from botanical is it's a word that relates to botany. Now, what botany is essentially the study of plants, the the branch of biology that studies plants specifically. So, botanical is a word that relates to that. So, botany and botanical are all relating to the study of plants, really. And so, obviously, a botanist as well, which is a person, an expert scientist to study plants. So, I'm a historian myself, not a botanist. But a botanist, like a historian, is an expert in their own particular field, the study of plants in this world, really. And so, yeah, botanical illustration, putting those two, is basically a scientific drawing that explains a plant in some way or explains plant life in some way. So, yeah, really good answers for a start. But where did all this start? So, botanical illustrations, we at Amgueddfa Cymru in Museum Wales have thousands of botanical illustrations, and they're really important, which is hopefully something you'll understand more of when we get to the end of this. But essentially, what botanical illustrations are those images of flowers illustrating or explaining the plant. But people have been drawing plants and depicting plants for thousands of years. So the ancient Greeks have been creating plants, painting them on walls. Even the ancient Egyptians would chisel them into stones as part of their hieroglyphs and things like that. And in fact, the ancient Greeks were one of the first kind of people to bridge the gap and to start painting and drawing plants and plant life into books. Now, what they were doing is they were creating what we would later term as herbals, as you can see here in this picture here, a herbal. Now, many people would call these, remedy books or things like that, but generally we lump them all together in a broad group, calling them herbals. Now, if you picked up a herbal book, it would give you medicines. Now, the ancient Greek left many, many detailed descriptions of herbal remedies about, but Britain would be quite slower in terms of printing books and creating books. So in Britain, in the UK where we are, we didn't start printing herbals till the 12 or 1300s, really. And what we would do is we would print the books with descriptions about, how to help ourselves, and basically make ourselves better if we're feeling unwell. Now, often a lot of people now, modern day, dismiss these books outright and poke fun at them, and quite rightly so in some respects, because you do get some very, very dodgy medical explanations, like this one right here. So this is a herbal cure for deafness from the 1400s in the UK. And so you would take rat's urine, the oil of eels, the house leek, and the juice of traveller's joy and a boiled egg, and mix all that together, and your deafness would be cured. Now, I don't recommend any of you guys trying that out because I don't think it'll end in the way you want it to. But a lot of these remedies are kind of looked upon negatively nowadays. But regardless of some of the remedies being quite dubious, like this one, it is an important step forward in medicine, and plants basically form pretty much all the medicines that were being used at the time. Even to this very day, when you go to, a pharmacy or when you go to a supermarket and you see the tablets and pills and remedies and medicines on the shelves, about 25 to 30% of all of those medicines come from plants. And that's today. Back then, it was 100%. So the rest, modern day now, are used making synthetic ingredients and synthetic chemicals, which didn't exist. So herbals were a really important, popular way of getting medicine out there and getting remedies out there. But obviously, if you're giving remedies out, having a picture of a plant is really useful in many ways. And so the 13 and 1400s were a time where they were printing these books and printing a picture as well as an illustration. But the illustrations were fairly simplistic, and I'll show you one here now. So this is what we call a wood block printing. And so a carver would carve a piece of wood and carve the design of the plant and then print it by hand into a book. And we call it wooden block printing or wood block printing. And it was used almost like a stamp. The problem with that is the detail you could get in the plants was not that great. It was not that precise. And so like those plants there, they can might be recognized by some people, but for the majority of people, they might be harder to recognize. And so, but it wouldn't be until around the 1600s that printing improved massively and they became able to do far more detailed pictures, like this picture here. So mechanical printing, so the printing press and things like that, which were invented in the 1600s, allowed people to start printing very detailed and very specific drawings and printing and prints in their books. And so these books now became much more widely available, not just because the printing quality was up, but because they were using mechanical printing, they were able to produce much more books because in the 1400, all the books were being made by hand, not by machine. And so having a printing press and having more detailed printing techniques really opened up Herbals, and a lot more people around the world wanted to use them and get access to them because obviously they wanted to be fit and healthy. And so, with plants being so important to health, naming the plants became as important as illustrating the plants. So, the naming of a plant was something that was kind of a strange thing, really, because everyone created their own kind of unique names in many ways. So, in the 1600, for example, most people would call plants by what we call common names. So, for example, we got two plants here. We've got the forget-me-nots and foxgloves. Now, they are what we call a common name. A common name starts weirdly, it might start locally in one place and then spread out, but it's generally a name for a plant that most people use. The problem with naming these common names is that plants don't come in just one variety. So, for example, if we look at forget-me-nots and foxgloves, they come in many different varieties. So all of these plants you see on the screen, all of them are named forget-me-nots and all of them are named foxglove. So there's a very difficult problem to kind of work through there. And so when you were, looking through your herbal remedy book, you might get confused and use the totally wrong plant in many ways because there were so many varieties and so many different names and so many common names. So two things needed to be done really. First, we needed to have a system of naming the plants. So we needed to create a system of naming plants. And that came in the 1700s, which a lot of the history we'll talk about today happened in that 1700s time frame. And essentially it started with this gentleman. In 1735, a Swedish man named Carl Linnaeus came up with a new naming system called taxonomy. And Carl Linnaeus essentially he was looking to create a system that would name things. And so what he went out and did is he created this system called taxonomy. And this is the book that he kind of published his thoughts in. And taxonomy would be a branch of science that classifies new things, really, and classifies all living things, rather. It's not new things. And so essentially what would be happening is scientists around the world would be using the names that they came up with for these plants. But that wouldn't do because everyone needed a universal name. So Carl Linnaeus came up with an idea of taxonomy, naming everything, and he also used Latin as a language as well, because Latin at the time, even though a lot of us don't know or understand Latin now, it was quite a universal language for scientists back in the day. And so taxonomy became this branch of science that classifies all living things, including plants. And there were many different steps to these naming systems. And for our purposes today, though, there are two important parts to this. And these bits, if you forget a lot about what I've said earlier, these bits are the most important bits because these are going to play into what I'm going to be asking you to do later on, really. So I want you to say this word out loud for me in the classroom if you can. Genus. Hopefully you're all saying that. Genus. Now, genus is the first part of this scientific name for a plant. Now, what a genus is it's sort of like a surname, but it comes first rather than second. But it's the name of a group of plants that are closely related. If we use the daffodil as an example, it's part of the narcissus group of plants. So if you see two pictures there, both of those pictures are of daffodils. Now, the words above the narcissus, and then I won't butcher the Latin for daffodil, but essentially Latin words were used, but they translate to English as the wild daffodil or the poet's daffodil. And you see, they're two different daffodils, but they both start with the same genus, the same first name. All daffodils, all daffodils, no matter what they look like, will start with that specific name because that's the name of the species, the genus. Okay. And so daffodils as well were named Narcissus after a Greek mythological story, which some of you may know, actually. Some of you may, because Greek mythology is massive at the moment. I know my daughter adores Percy Jackson and all that type of thing. And so Narcissus is a Greek mythological story. And this is a painting of Narcissus. And what happened to him is he was famed for his beauty. Everywhere he went, everyone would fall in love with him. And he angered the gods in a different way. And they thought, we're going to punish him for angering us. So they led him to a pool of water and they tricked him to looking at his own reflection. And he fell in love with himself. Now, depending on what story or what version of the story you read, he either stayed there staring at himself until he went old and died, or he fell into the pond and drowned. Not very happy endings to the story, but because a daffodil is such a beautiful flower, and because a lot of them have heads that lean forward and look down, Narcissus was the name given to the daffodil. Now, though, the next part, because I said to you there were two parts. The genus is the first part of the name, and the second part is the specific name. Do you want to say that out loud for me? Specific name. If you're anything like S's with me, some of you will trip over that. But this is essentially the descriptive part of the name. So often it can be describing the place it's found, maybe even the color, maybe, who found it. There's a variety of different ways, really. So you've look at the two examples there. You've got the wild daffodil because that was found abundantly in the wild, and then the poet's daffodil. So someone named the poet's daffodil to be a bit more creative and a bit more poetic about naming their plants, really. And so the genus is the name of the species, and the specific name is a bit more of a descriptive name. So now that we have living things being scientifically named, the creation of illustrations, botanical illustrations, needed to be upped and needed to be more kind of detailed than ever before. Because books would now be published with unique plant names, and the detailed description needed an accurate drawing. Now you can see from this illustration, for example, a botanical illustration shows different parts of the plant. We're not just looking at the pretty part of the plant, the center part, or the leaves, or the stems, or anything. We're looking at the bulbs, we're looking at a cross section, which you can see here, and we're exploring the plant. And so when we read the text and look at the picture, we should have a good idea of everything we need to know, really. A botanical illustrator in the 1900s said, I don't simply copy how a plant looks, but I explain the plant through my drawing. And that's really important because obviously some of you might think, well, photography exists now, so why don't we just take photos of them and abandon botanical illustration? But even when some of these illustrations were being created, we still were preferring, even when photography rather came into play, we still were preferring illustrations because photography is just capturing a plant as it looks. But a botanical illustration is capturing a plant and explaining the different parts of it. So let's have a look at some botanical drawings from our collection here at Amgueddfa Cymru at Museum Wales and see if you can guess the plant variety. Just the common name, though I'm not going to ask you to do any Latin or any species names or anything like that. Just the common name we would use for these plants. And I've started with a wonderfully easy one for you here. So if in the chat you are quick off on you type in, what is this plant that's on screen right now? Oak Grove says daffodil. Miss Keegan, fingers are on fire then. Yeah, daffodil, daffodil, daffodil. Yes. You were all very much right. Daffodil, it is the national flower of Wales. And yeah, oh, someone's being clever. They're putting narcissus. Well done. A wild daffodil, it is indeed. And again, I'm glad it means that you were hearing me, which is great. But yeah, daffodil indeed. I'm gonna go for a slightly harder one now, though. So that's the daffodil. So what's next? Any ideas of what this is? And while you're thinking, I'll add that some of the botanical illustrations add bugs and bug life and plant life and nature life that thrives or interacts with the plant in some way. So you will get some plants that will show insect life as well. Oh, we got some saying daisy, buttercup. Oh, that's buttercup. Or everyone's Nora's confident as they were with the daffodils. Buttercup, buttercup. Everyone's saying buttercup. I will reveal the name. Buttercup. Well done for those who got buttercup. Let's try another one then. This one is a difficult one, but again, this is from one of the books that we've got in the collection here. And this is a perfect kind of picture of how a plant looked and how it compared to the text. So you would have the text and the plant next to it, and you can see a lot of the different parts of the plant being showcased in different ways. Really detailed botanical drawing there. So Oak Grove says poppy. Oh, so someone Mountain Lane is going very well. Fair play. So someone's saying poppy, poppy, Welsh poppy from Mountain Lane. There's someone that's definitely interested in plants in Mountain Lane. Yellow poppy, poppy, poppy. I'll reveal now. The Welsh poppy. So for all of you that got a poppy, great. But for those of you that specifically got Welsh, well done. That's very good. Because again, there's lots of varieties of poppy, so I've kind of made this one a little harder for you. And this one, what do you think? Again, this is from the same book that we just looked at. So you've got the botanical illustration down one side, and then the text on the other. Most of the text being in Latin. Okro says poppy, poppy, crocus, poppy. Oh, see, you're all going well. Crocus, we got some crocus. Hopefully, you'll be seeing crocuses very soon at all your schools, really. Crocus, poppy, poppy, poppy. Good, good, good. We're looking good. Right, this, I'll reveal what this is. A white poppy. Now, I put this up there not to confuse and annoy you. I just wanted to kind of showcase again that difference in, like, oh, amazing. Now, I'm not sure if Kay Williams there typed that in after I shared that, but if you didn't, well done, fair play to you. But yeah, basically, this it just showcases how uniquely kind of different the plants can be. Like they look like a poppy, but then you've got other versions that kind of got a slight look of a poppy, but are very different as well and breed very different. But they're still the same species, really. Now, this one here, this is not a plant. This is not a flower. It is a fruit, and this is the easiest one. Yes, because unlike some of the other ones, this illustration has got captions and names on it. So this is a papaya or pawpaw, as some people might pronounce it. And the papaya is a really interesting thing, really, because it was signaling how botanical illustration was really kind of at the cutting edge of science and exploration and everything like that. And we'll get more on that in a minute now. But the finding, naming, and illustration of plants became so important, really, and that there was epic voyages traveling around the world. So at this point in the 1700s, really, Britain was a massive, massive world power, and they had a gigantic navy, and they were sending ships all around the world to discover places. Even though they were, indigenous people that had been living in these places many years, they were going around and discovering and claiming these countries as part of the British Empire and things like that. Now, often there would be a big military a big military presence on these ships, but there was a new type of person that would come on these ships now in the 1700s, a new type of crew member, a botanist. A botanist, a person who, if you remember from earlier, studies plants and plant life. Now, these epic voyages across waters, uncharted territories, taking years upon years, would suddenly be taking botanists around. So these journeys would take them all across the world. And this is a painting that we've got in the collection here in Amgueddfa Cymru. And it's of Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander. And it's by the Welsh artist William Parry. No relation to me. But yeah, these two were on board a very unique ship. They were on board Captain Cook's ship to Australia, a massive journey where Captain Cook would go to Australia and go to New Zealand and try to claim the country for the British Empire. They left Britain in August 1768, and they travelled from Britain all the way down to Australia through New Zealand and landed in Australia. That journey would take them a year and a half and a little bit more, actually, because they landed in April 1770. And the very first place they docked, the first place in Australia they got out of their ship, they named it, and they named it Botany Bay. Now, as you can tell, that's named after a botanist. Now, why? Captain Cook, James Cook, wrote in his diary, the great quantity of plants Mr. Banks and Daniel Solander found in this place occasioned me giving it a name of Botany Bay. And that is amazing when you think of it. The very first place the British people went and colonized and occupied was named after a botanist because there was such a unique abundance of plant life that Mr. Banks and Dr. Solander were drawing and documenting endlessly. They spent months and months and months just documenting all these new plants and species. None of these would be able to survive the trip back home, the year and a half voyage on a ship back to Britain. So the only way they were able to get this information back to Britain was drawing it and explaining it and studying it. So obviously, being a scientist here is one skill, but being a botanist requires you to have other skills as well, namely drawing and creating an image of the plant you're looking at. So being able to draw is an obvious skill for a botanist, but being able to understand the plant, because I'm sure many of you are really skilled artists and are great at drawing and painting and things like that. But understanding that what you're drawing is not a drawing, it's an explanatory illustration. You're explaining something through a picture. So you have to think about it in different ways. But first and foremost, you need to know a bit about plants as well. So I'm going to test your knowledge in the classrooms over there as well. I'm going to test your knowledge and see basically what we come up with. But before I go to that, this Victoria Amazonica is another show of how the exploration of plants continued really around Britain. This was discovered in South America. Now, they were traveling botanists in South America, went on board voyages, taken years, arrived in South America, and they started drawing the lilies and the giant lilies. And because the year they discovered this was 1837, the same year that Queen Victoria took the throne in Britain, they named it in her honour, Victoria Amazonica, the giant water lily. Now, you might not be able to tell from looking at it, the plant is beautiful, but the lily pads were massive. And you could actually stand on the lily pads, as you can see there. This is some gardens in London in the late 1800s where they brought a species over and cultivated it and created it in the UK. And they would take photos of people standing on the giant lily pads, really, which is amazing. But now, let's get to testing your knowledge on flowers. So there's an arrow going to point to different parts of this daffodil. And we're going to kind of keep it broad, keep it simple, don't have to go overly detailed, but we're going to go through what the different parts of the flower are. So we're going to start with a slightly easy one, What is the arrow pointing at there? There's a few coming in. Thankfully, everyone's getting this one right because it only gets slightly more difficult after this. So we got to start off well. So yeah, most of the people are saying petal. I think everyone is saying petal thus far, which is great because it is indeed a petal, which is the great start. Now things will get a little bit harder. So make sure to not shout out crazily, but have a think about what you think it is. So the arrow is pointing to this part of the daffodil, which has a specific name. Oakdale says trumpet. Nectar, some people are saying, yeah. Not many people. The head, yeah, trumpet. Trumpet, maybe. Head, trumpet, trumpet. A lot of people are saying trumpet, which is great. But it's not quite right. So is anyone else going to have another go? It's not a trumpet. It's something that you all kind of find familiar. Nectar, it's not nectar. You'll all find this word familiar, but not for a positive thing. It's called a corona. Now, obviously, we had the coronavirus, a pandemic not long ago, but corona is a crown, a kind of crown-like part, which is why the virus is named after it, because of the shape of the viral strain. But this is the corona. But you are all quite right. A lot of the throwaway nicknames we give this is the trumpet. So many people will call it a trumpet, but it is actually the corona. Let's try another one. And so this is this central top here of the flower. Nectar. You're doubling down on nectar. We will see if you're right in a second now. Nectar, nectar, nectar. Maybe stigma, pollen, stigma. Stamen, some people are saying nectar stem. Oh, nectar. You have a drink and then I will put you out of your misery. So let us have a look. What we've got is the stigma. The stigma. So any of you who said stigma, 100% right. Very good knowledge. And yeah, the stigma is in that central place there. And we got one last part of the plant. This part, though, the name of the plant actually is often called two other names, which is confusing enough, but it's actually called one name, but it's in two parts, if that makes sense. So I will accept a few versions of this, but let's see how you go. This part here. Yeah, or corona, similar to the Welsh word for crown, coron. Nice knowledge here, Dan. Fair play. Sepals, stamens, anther. Yeah. Coron, crown. Yeah. Anther. Nice. You're all going. And like I say, I would say there are three words that I would accept from that arrow, really. Because like I say, it's called one thing that's split in two parts. Anther, filament, stamen, style, yeah, pollen. These are all looking very good. You're all very knowledgeable, which is a good start. Pollen, nectar. Style, D11 says pollen, anther. Great. What we've got is we've got the stamen. But, and this is credit to you all know this, but you might not know it properly. The stamen is actually in two parts. So it fits, the filament is one part of it and the anther is another part. So if you get any of those, then I'll accept that as broadly right, really. So it's the stamen, but the stamen is in two parts, which is the filament and the anther. So if we go over it one last time, really, and say it all as a class, really. So we've got petal, corona, stigma, and stamen. So well done for all of you kind of getting that right for the most part. Some of them are easier than others. So we've talked a lot about botanical illustration and the importance of naming plants, but how am I actually how but now we're going to kind of take a quick look at an artist named Cedric Morris, because he links quite nicely to a task I want you all to complete going forward. And this is a big task that you've got to kind of put your mind to. But first and foremost, let me tell you a little bit about Cedric Morris. So Cedric was born in Sketty in Swansea in 1889. Now, Cedric excelled at painting flowers. Now, often the type of picture he drew and painted would be called a still life picture. So, for example, this is a picture of one of his flower paintings. And generally, if you study in this in school and things like that, people might say this is a still life picture. Now, what that means, a still life picture is normally something that you set up that's not moving, that's kind of not physically, moving and walking around or changing in any way. And so typically a still life would be a bowl of fruit on a table and you paint it, or a bowl of flower or a vase of flowers on a table. But for Cedric adored plants and planting so much that he never considered this type of drawing a still life picture. When he was creating these illustrations of plants, he was creating portraits of flowers with personalities and emotions. And they were not just still life paintings, they were as full of emotion and life as portraits of people. So he grew his own flowers as well. He didn't just paint flowers, he would grow his own flowers, and he even created hybrid flowers. Now, hybrid flowers are known as hybrids, or what we call cultivars. Now, if you can, I want you to all say that name out loud in the class. Cultivar. Cultivar or cultivars, if there's the plural, if there's many of them. So a cultivar is basically a species that has been cultivated by humans, been created by humans in some way. Now, some of you may not realize that many of the plants that we see and interact with are created with human hands being in the mix. So it takes a lot of time, though. And so it allows you to kind of breed new types of flowers and new colors, which Cedric Morris loved. So, for example, Cedric, being an artist, loved mixing colors and testing out different colors. So he would, try to create a hybrid and try to create a unique color by mixing two different colors together and seeing what comes out. Now, that might not make a lot of sense, but if we go through one way of creating a hybrid or a cultivar. So one way is hand pollination. Now, hand pollination is one of the most basic ways of doing this, really. And there are, like I say, many, many ways of making this. But what Cedric Morris would do when he was creating one of his cultivars or hybrid flowers is he would first get the pollen. He would get the pollen on a little brush from one plant. Then he would take that brush and brush the pollen into a different plant. Now, what he's doing there is he's taking the plant and the pollen of one plant and then mixing it with another to try and create a new species or a new color or a new kind of creation. Now, I said species, but that's not quite right, because the plants that mix, they have to be in the same genus, in the same species. You can't just mix a daffodil with a cactus. It's not going to work. You have to mix a daffodil with a daffodil species, but it allows you, because there's such a broad range of daffodils, you might take the poet's daffodil and mix it with the wild daffodil, for example. And so there are different ways you can use it. So after you've got the pollen and you've mixed it with another plant of the same species, then you get the seeds. So if you look at this is a wilted daffodil, and here is a seed pod. This seed pod will ultimately produce seeds like this dried out one at the bottom here, and these black things are the seeds, the daffodil seeds. Now, sometimes the plants might not even get a seed pod. It doesn't happen every time. That's why you've got to take the pollen and brush it on lots of different ones. You've got to really maximize how much you're going to get from it, really, because Getting a seed pod is difficult enough, but again, getting the next bit is even more difficult in many ways. You take the seeds and you plant them in a pot and bring them indoors. And then when you bring them indoors, you allow them to grow. And when they grow into what we call a seedling, and can you all say that word for me as well if you can? Seedling. A seedling, as you can see with this picture, is just as the plant is starting to sprout, it's just as the plant is starting to grow, okay? And so when the seedling comes out, you then take it outside and plant it outside and then take care of it. Now, obviously, all of this process, you have to take care of the plant, water it, make sure it's got the correct soil, sunlight, all that type of thing. But then when the seedling goes outside, you then take care of it and you have to wait then until it grows and blooms. Now, Cedric Morris's favourite flower was a flower called an iris. Now, an iris would be a flower that looks like this one here, the Iris Edward of Windsor, as it's called there. Now, what he loved most about the irises is just how different and unique and beautiful they looked in many ways. So he would create different versions of the iris plant. But for him, it would take many months to gather seeds, and then many more months to gather seedling, and then it would take up to 2 years to actually get the plant to grow and to bloom. So if Cedric Morris was doing this hybrid now, and we started that process with him, we wouldn't see the end of that process for 2 years until we know that we've got something unique and new. So Iris Edward of Windsor, for example, is a pink iris. So a pink iris was developed by him, and it was the first pink iris that had ever been produced. And that is what is called Iris Edward of Windsor. And then you've got the other one there on the page, which is a daffodil called Cedric Morris. Now, the daffodil wasn't created by him. It was created by a friend and named in his honor. But if you notice at the top of this page, we've got Latin and then English words, Cedric Morris, Edward of Windsor. And this is one thing that you've got to keep in your mind. Earlier, I told you 2 names that go into naming a plant, the genus and the specific name. And those, for wildflowers, wild species that occur naturally outdoors, always have to be named in Latin. But for species that we create, cultivated species, cultivars, you have to name that second part, that specific part of the name, in a modern language. So English or Welsh or whatever is a modern language, but it can't be Latin. So that's why you've got Narcissus Cedric Morris. The Narcissus is the one that we have to have, and that always is in Latin, really. And this bit has to be in English Cedric Morris. Now, this is really important because to celebrate 20 years of the Spring Bulbs for Schools programme, we've had our own daffodil created. And this is that daffodil. But the daffodil, sadly, has no name whatsoever. And this is where you guys all come in. So if you haven't done this already, then definitely listen up. If you have done this and submitted one name, maybe you can submit one individual to you as a pupil or one for the class. It's up to you how you want to do it, really. And I'll talk you through how we are going to name this plant. So pay attention to this bit for certain, because it's not an easy thing to name a plant. And there's a few rules that you have to go through. Now, first and foremost, we do have a guide, which I will email out at the end of this to everyone, and you can look through the guide and find out exactly what the plant naming process is. But it'll also tell you that there's some special prizes for the winning class and the name that we pick to actually go for the daffodil. And the prizes will be unique kind of exhibition quality flowers for your school, which are really high quality flowers, which will really impress any visitors to the school, to be honest. But obviously, the name will be registered in the Royal Horticultural Society as well for daffodils. And so your name, like Cedric Morris is plant and daffodil, your name that you come up with will live on in this variety. So what do you have to do? What do you have to do to name? First and foremost, keep in mind that you don't have to worry about the Latin. The genus is that first name. So you see 3 daffodils there. All of them have the first surname, Narcissus. Narcissus tete-a-tete, Narcissus King Alfred, Narcissus Ice Follies. Every daffodil will have that. So the job that you've got to do is already 50% done, because you all know that the first part of your name has to be Narcissus. No other name needed at all. But then the second part is really where you kick into another gear, really. The first part, the genus, will always be Narcissus, and then the specific name can be a bit more creative. Now, what some people do is they describe a name of a place or a person in honor of the plant, like Cedric Morris was named in honor of that daffodil. You can do that, but often as well, a more descriptive name, like the Narcissus Ice Follies there. It's got that ice part because of the color of it, because it's more ice-like color. So it's using a creative way to describe how the plant looks. And so you can certainly do that if you like, but the second part definitely has to be more of a descriptive kind of name, or a name in honor, or that type of thing. So let's go through the broad strokes of this now then. All daffodils are in the genus of Narcissus, so they have to start with the name Narcissus. The names should generally be creative and meaningful. They might describe the origin or a person or the plant, or they might just be a fun or symbolic name to you, really. It can be a broad variety of things. The one thing they cannot be, though, is misleading. So, for example, if I have got a yellow daffodil, if I name that yellow daffodil Snow White, and so the white there is kind of almost a misleading name. You can't really name it a name that confuses the description of it. So you can't call a daffodil that's yellow a purple daffodil or something like that. It can't be misleading. The other thing is names should really be unique in many ways. And so we've got what we call the Royal Horticultural Society Daffodil Registrar. And what you do there is you go into that document, and I'll share the link online. And when you've come up with your name, you type it in and double check that it doesn't already exist. Now, it might already exist because there are thousands of daffodils, but the likelihood is that you have to check. And if it does exist, you have to think of another one. Then the final thing you have to do is visit our page on Amgueddfa Cymru and submit your name. All you see in the screen there is all the details you will need for this. You don't need any more than that. You need the daffodil name, you need your name, the school name, and then the school email address, so we can contact the email school with, the prizes. If you do get confused about anything or need the terms and conditions or the naming guide, you can see there on the page there. And all of this will be emailed out to you after the session today now, really. And so this is a competition that's only open until January 31st, though. January 31st, whatever names we have in that by then are the names going forward, and the names that will adorn this brand new variety of plant that we have created for the 20th anniversary of Spring Bulbs. Now, we've been through tons and tons of information there. And so to just go over briefly what we've been through today, we've been through botanical illustrations and how they started, and what they mean and how they explain plants along with words, and they give very good descriptions of plant life. How they help people identify different medicines and remedies over the years, and loads of different things about plant illustration. We learnt about the genus and the specific name, the naming of a plant, and taxonomy. Carl Linnaeus is his system of naming plants. And we've learnt about Cedric Morris and his artwork, and how he created hybrid irises and plants all over his gardens in the UK, really. And hopefully you'll remember a few details about the plant naming, because this is really a perfect opportunity for your school to have a very unique thing, associated with your school, a unique daffodil that your school will name, and it will be there forever. The next session we're going through now, the next session, which will be on the 21st of January, is going to be much, much less talking from me, because this week is all getting the information across of what we're talking about and getting all these different things out of the way, really, and laying the groundwork for you guys having a really fun painting workshop next week. So I will email out some how-to guides and some information on what you need, but we will be joined by an artist who is going to take you through painting your own botanical illustration. I would advise you to remember the names we use, because we will be naming some of the parts of the flower as well. So it's really important that you remember those elements as well. But you will be painting a botanical masterpiece. I will email this out today along with the naming document, and you should have everything you need then, and I will give you a reminder next week as well. But you will not see my face next week, but you'll see our lovely resident artist Rhiannon, who will be taking you through all of what you need. And that is basically all from me today. I very much hope you've enjoyed kind of exploring botanical illustrations and the collection at Amgueddfa Cymru with us today. And hopefully you will come back next week and spend some time with our artist and create some amazing paintings. I really would like to share your paintings and artwork as wide as possible. So we'll talk more about kind of getting some pictures of your artwork and stuff next week. But hopefully you'll come along and do some painting and become a botanical illustrator with us next week. Has anyone, before we go, got any questions that they would like to ask me before we end today's session? And I would be more than happy to answer anything, as long as it's not too difficult. Thank you very much. I'm glad it was excellent. That is much appreciated. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch yn fawr, everyone. And for those English or Scottish or Irish schools, diolch yn fawr is thank you very much in Cymraeg, in Welsh. And diolch yn fawr. Thank you, guys. Thank you all. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions or they want a recording, perfect. Please, can you send a recording as we struggle with the sound? Definitely. I will be uploading the recording to our YouTube channel, and I'll just share the link with you when that's done. It'll probably be after next week's session now, and then I'll upload the two of them, kind of part 1 and part 2 next week. But that is 100% something that I will email around, definitely. If you've got any questions or you need to double check anything for next week's session, then definitely get in touch, and I will leave you to it now, and I will end this chat. But thank you very much for all your time, and have a very good day. Hwyl fawr, everyone.